a bit quiet and serious. It just gives me a moment to edit between when we start off. LinkedIn Echo Chamber. This is ML's Light Teen Spirit. Today we have a special guest. Sienne is here. Sienne, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Nice to be here.
Yeah, and where are you dialing in from, please? I'm collecting guest locations. Where are you today?
I'm in sunny Cambridge. Still lots of water around.
Okay, must mean it's been raining. So Cambridge I haven't had yet, so I'll add a pin to my map. Thank you for that. Now, Sienne, I announced you as a special guest because you're a special guest in that you are the first person I've interviewed who I didn't know before. Well, I knew you for only 1 hour before you arrived today. So we connected because you were doing a bit of outreach on LinkedIn where you say, hey, I just want to connect with new people. And I responded to you. So how about that?
Yeah, it was a fantastic experiment. I gave my time away for a whole month and met some of the most amazing people like you, and had half-hour conversations on any problem of their choosing. Really interesting conversations, and it's amazing how LinkedIn is able to create networks upon networks. So if you're finding that you need a little bit of inspiration or you're stuck, it's a great way to experiment and find out, what comes your way via your network.
So Sienne, in the spirit of the show, we are for data folk, marketers, data scientists, in the spirit of what could be measured. Can I ask you just to remind me of the statistics you captured from your experiment, please? I think everyone will be interested in this.
Yeah, so I had 27 people took up the offer of a half hour of my time. Of those, I had 3 no-shows. Of the 27, only 7 people I had met before in any capacity. And I've had several follow-ups. So I'd say now I've had 5 follow-ups, including this one, from meetings that I've had over that period. And it gave me a fantastic opportunity to test some of my own kind of automation tools too. Yeah, highly recommend it.
Sienne, thank you for joining. Thank you for the support in response to that. Now, look, when people come on for the first time, Sienne, I like people to introduce themselves. So could you take 60 seconds, please, to tell everybody where you've been, what you've been doing, which brand you're working with? I know you had a very distinguished career. Congratulations for that, but try and squeeze that into 60 seconds for me, please.
So I generally tend to work on very large-scaled retail problems at organizations like M&S, John Lewis, Morrison's, Kingfisher, but I've also strayed into education and gaming. And I help people rebuild platforms, scale platforms for e-commerce, integrate online and offline channels, and help to create really fantastic end-to-end customer experiences. And along the way, we transform organizations, help people to understand how to integrate digital into every team at every level, how to use data to measure and experiment and grow, and also how to integrate agile methodologies into everyone's workflow. So it's not just something that the techie team do. And now I have my own consultancy, Invisible Stuff. Why invisible? Because my mother has never really understood what I do. But I build things that you shouldn't see. And I believe all technology should be invisible.
Great, thank you for that. And so, Sienne, what was interesting about meeting you is that you brought your own topic to me, which is great as an interviewer. So I said, Sienne, what can you talk about? And you said, hey, I'm going to talk about data for growth in the retail context. So can you introduce your initial thoughts as to, what that really is? And then we'll start to dig into the detail.
One of the cool things about retail, and this is probably true of any business, but particularly in retail, is when you have customers shopping with you on whatever frequency, daily, weekly, maybe they only come to you at Christmas time to buy Christmas gifts, you get great sources of data. And with all of the amazing digital tools we have, everything is more measurable than ever before. And so you can really get into the mind of your customer and you can understand how they engage with you, where they engage with you. and what impacts how they engage. So those changes over time, seasonal changes, what happens when competitors enter the market. What I see happening is a lot of businesses have got this data, but they're not entirely sure what to do. So they've got pots and pots of data that they are tracking, and they can see stuff going up and down. But when you have to translate all of that existing data, which is historical, into what are we going to prioritize and build on for the future, that's, I think, where a lot of organizations become unstuck, because there is always a lot more to do than you have capital available. And the temptation is to focus on the things that are sure bets. So fixing things like revenue and conversion and fixing existing products is very tempting, because they're known, and because you've already got something that exists and you've got historical data, you can continue to optimize and grow. And that's important. You should always be doing that. However, what a lot of businesses are probably not good at is thinking about the sort of next two horizons of growth. So what's going to be a source of growth in the near future? How can you continue to delight customers? How can you create new sources of value, new propositions? And how do you experiment with some of the new stuff that's coming along? Because you're probably going to have to fail many, many times before either that thing gets traction in the market, or before you can figure out how best to integrate it into customer journeys. And I think that's where I've seen, particularly in retail, it's a real struggle. And that constant contention between tech support, infrastructure, investment in enablement, investment in growth of the existing propositions, and investing in new propositions is very rarely balanced.
So, Sienne, can I roll you back slightly to a question that we hadn't prepared for when we briefed this session? You talked about the different pots of data that's coming into retail. So I'm familiar with this. I get drawn towards, there's some data from a channel, there's some data from a proposition, there's some data from a scheme. There's probably lots of people in retail that are feeling like they have these pots of data and it's all a bit disparate. So when you were a leader in retail, do you have any tips or just points of philosophy as to how do you sort of generate insights when all this data is a bit specific to the channel or the proposition or something like this? Is there anything that you learned or that you figured out that we could give as a tip, like how to even think of this, or how to, I should let you speak. Like what did you do when all this data is just a bit siloed?
So I think the first thing, step one, identify all of your data and understand the frequency or the cleanliness of that data. Step two is to create a common language. I think that's the most, as with any large grouping of people, making sure you're talking about the same thing is really important. So once you've got that data, to understand if there are any commonalities in the way it's captured. And I think key to that is the understanding of who is this customer. That's point one. So how are you identifying a customer? And it's amazing how when you ask that question, you'll get loads of different views of what a good customer identifier is. And in many businesses that have been trading for more than 5 years, what you'll find is you might get multiple different customer identifiers for the same customer. And I think agreeing on what your standard is going to be and how you're going to go forward on that is really key. And I think especially as we are in that world where cookies are no longer going to be a reliable way to continue to recognize a new customer coming in. So things like moving away from payment cards is also going to be really important, because as more of these become tokenized, they become quite poor identifiers, and you also find people will switch payment methods. It's highly unreliable. Even better is email. People tend to try not to change their email very much, and they might have more than one email associated with their account if you've got families shopping. And then finally, you can find some other identifier, loyalty schemes, etc. are a good add-on. Once again, what you're seeing now is lots and lots of kind of encouragement through pricing to join loyalty schemes for that very reason. And I think we'll probably have a bit of a rebellion from customers against what seems like inequitable pricing. But I think understanding what you're going to use as your common identifier and how permanent or how good that is going to be, not just today, but in the future, I think is a good start for any organization. And I think to make sure that you've got as many people from different perspectives, including finance and legal, around the table when you have that discussion.
Great, Sienne, brilliant answer. It reminds me of, I was just having a conversation with a customer yesterday about, stitching data, that data is consistently collected and labeled in a way that means, it can be used regardless from the source. And then you've brought in that kind of data stewardship and that it's consensus, other departments are involved in the process. My experience is if it's just like the data guys or IT, it goes bad pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas when it's owned by the business side, it's just much more successful all around. Now, earlier you talked about for the future, and you said one of my favorite words, which is, I'm obsessed with experiments and how things work. So I'd like to pick on that, please, while we still have time. So what would be, tips you've got for how people can think of this? And just any insights you've got as to, what you were doing and what you've learned by trying to, develop future propositions this way.
I think the great thing that you can do with customers, and you'll always have a group of customers that is almost up for anything, is to find those customers who are willing to participate in co-creation. So I think in any rebuild, lots of us have gone through re-platforms or building new propositions, and it can feel quite painful. I think we often are tempted to make those available internal only because we don't want to damage the brand or potentially show customers stuff that isn't super shiny. But I think customers quite like getting involved in stuff early doors and feeling as though they are helping to build. So I think if you can try and create a beta version of your experience and invite customers in, whether you do this statistically by adding 1% of customers see the new thing, or you invite customers who have a propensity to engage with you, so people who write reviews and who are super frequent customers, I think it's a good idea to try and do that and not just have it as an internal customer. So, for example, your staff, because then I think you're getting a good view of what the future could be. I think also involving people in that data from across the business as your experiment starts to change. And I think a great example of this of experimenting has been, at John Lewis, we rebranded and rebuilt the entire website over the course of about 18 months. But we did that iteratively and invited customers into that new experience. And parts of the website and the apps were moving as they were engaging. And we made sure that they could give comments and feedback on what they were seeing and experiencing. At Kingfisher, for the B&Q brand, we built a marketplace, and we had a very similar approach of making sure real customers were shopping and engaging with that experience and telling us what they thought about it and what a good marketplace experience would be, and whether they could use all the features along the way. So that's point one, engage your customers early. Engage all of the people who are going to be decision makers as well, and seeing those customers engaging with your experiment, whatever it may be. So I think bringing your customer into the room, we've got fantastic research and video tools and data, and making sure that decision makers are seeing that and are open to the idea of your customers having an experience that isn't necessarily perfect, I think is also good, because it allows you to start to flex the boundaries of your brand and your experiences for the future.
Yeah, I love it. What I take from it is the co-creation. I really love. So, I was that data guy thinking about how do we measure a new prop, or how do we prepare to know if this was a good thing? And, we're always talking about internal data. The product leader for the project would be super passionate about how their product was going to be a game changer for the customers. But of course, it's that sample of one, and nobody loves it like the person who is working on it. It's not really representative of a cohort of consumers, or,
Yeah.
or something like this. So Ian, thanks for all your insights. Good news is you've survived your first interview with me, but the bad news is we're hitting time, Ian. So we're going to have to end it here. So thank you for everything, ladies and gents. This has been ML's Like Teen Spirit.